Hello and welcome to the You Love to See It YouTube channel. This is the very first episode of the You Love to See It podcast and had to make it a big one. I'm excited to welcome probably the person I look up to the most in the Mariners content creator space here, Dane Gonzalez of the Locked On Mariners podcast. If you don't know him, I would be shocked if you're watching this video now. Locked On Mariners currently sits at over 10K subs on YouTube, so welcome to the pod.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for having me be your first guest on the first show on the YouTube channel. I'm honored, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, I appreciate
congrats to you, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm incredibly appreciative of how gracious you've been with your time to sit on here. I think I'm only at like 23 subs right now, so I'm just like, that's super cool that you're that open about it.
Dude, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Colby and I had like 15 patrons. I had no expectations of this going really anywhere, but I love to talk ball, man. I love this team. I mean, I think that's how you feel as well. And guys like Jay's Trident podcast, we love this team. We love Seattle sports. We want to talk about them, and they're even until just the last year or so, really, there hasn't been a whole lot of people talking about these teams, especially the Mariners. So it's so cool to see this community continue to grow and seeing more voices like you start to enter the sphere and start talking about this team. It's awesome, man.
Yeah, no, and that is a good segue into kind of the first part I was going to go into anyways, because I'm a really new fan of the Mariners. I've been a baseball fan forever. I used to play it for a long time. And I grew up as a Giants fan because my parents are from the Bay Area. So, naturally you have to take on your dad's team. That's how it works. Right. But then I found myself in a space where I had been watching baseball for a long time. And I live in Washington, so I'm like, let's see what the Mariners are doing. And that was right when Cal's Rainmaker happened.
Oh, wow.
And so I saw the collective freaking out all over social media about that. And I've watched back that clip so many times. I was just like, this is it. This is my sign right here,
Yeah, so, for sure, dude.
Yeah, but I thought it's been kind of an interesting dynamic between me and as well as everyone else in the content creator space. Everyone I talk to has been fans for such a long time, whereas I feel relatively new. I mean, some people could maybe even say bandwagon a little bit, but I mean, at this point with how this offseason's going, I don't know.
I don't think there's any such thing as bandwagoning in the Seattle Mariners.
No. If I was bandwagon, I'm not going to, choose the team who's never even been to the World Series. That's the exact opposite. So but to kind of go a little bit back from just being a Mariners fan, as far as baseball is concerned, where did you fall in love with the sport of baseball itself?
I mean, it started pretty much right out of the womb, nice. I mean, they had the Mariners game on as my mom was giving birth, basically.
Okay. So you were born into Mariners fandom.
They always tell the story about how the doctor was watching the game while also tending to her, and my dad's there watching the game. Chris Bosio pitched against the Rangers. I think they won 8-0 or something like that. It was great. Awesome.
Nice.
Go M's.
Do you think Ken Griffey hit a home run right as he came out? It's the perfect timing.
Yeah, that would have been anointed. Yeah, that would have been amazing. So it was pretty much since birth, really. I mean, I loved all the sports growing up, but baseball was the one that I took to the most as in terms of playing it. And so that was my sport growing up, just playing. I would play organized baseball. I didn't play organized football. I didn't play organized basketball. I played organized baseball, and I was good at it, at least relative to other kids that I was playing with. And so my interest continued to grow and grow and grow. I think the thing though that really made me fall in love with baseball was obviously the 2001 season. Ichiro made me fall in love with baseball. And the 2001 All-Star game is the most magical baseball thing there is in my mind. I videotaped that, and I probably watched that All-Star game 30, 40, 50 times as a kid. Loved it. It had this newspaper that listed out all the both rosters, and I learned everything about each and every single one of those players. and there was this store on Occidental Ave, as you're walking down to the left field gate. What was at the time Safeco Field, there was a store that had these replica helmets, and I would buy these helmets and I would go out in the backyard and wear each helmet and pretend I was like, if I was wearing a Marlins helmet, I would pretend I was Juan Pierre, or like,
yeah.
I didn't expect to give Juan Pierre a shout out on the show, but
there it is.
I would do that and like just have fun, and use my imagination, and just there was like this magic around baseball. And then obviously with the Mariners, I mean, there was a time where I kind of got disconnected from the Mariners when my family and I moved down to New Mexico, and they weren't good, and the MLB package was really expensive, and so I didn't watch a lot of games from like 2008 to 2011 ish. I didn't watch a lot of those games, so I missed a good chunk of like Felix's prime too. So for me, like when people talk about like their favorite Mariners, especially in this century, a lot of people say Felix. For me, it was Ichiro, and like Felix still means a lot to me, but definitely not nearly as much as he does to a lot of folks in the fandom. But yeah, once I got back into it, and they just like when they signed Cano was really when I started to really get back into the Mariners. And 2014 was such a heartbreaker. Like they were so close. The last couple of games 161 against the Angels is still one of my favorite things. Like the Logan Morrison double and all that, like just amazing. The fact that they got so close, like it made me hungry for the playoffs. It made me hungry for going to the World Series, seeing the Cubs win the World Series a couple years later, and like after seeing like it was 100+ years of them not winning a World Series, and to see them break that drought was magical. To see the reaction of that fan base in Chicago was magical, and it just made me want that for me and for the fan base even more. And now I'm covering the team. Baseball just makes the most sense to me in terms of like analyzing it. I really took to the analytics of it. I started reading Fangraphs around 20 years old, so about 7 years ago. Started really reading like Fangraphs and looking at all these different resources. I used to listen to Colin O'Keefe and his brother do their podcasts talking about the Mariners a long time ago. I don't even know if many people remember that. And that just kept me connected with the team, and that kept me connected with the sport, and helped me learn more about it. And I wanted to do that, and so eventually I found my way into doing that. And it's tough at times, especially dealing with the fan base when everyone is understandably furious with how things are going right now. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I love talking about this team. I love this team. So.
Yeah, well, and we'll get into the fan base a little bit in a second, but yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I feel like we have a lot of parallels here, and like kind of how we became baseball fans, as well as how we've gotten to where we're at now. Like I played baseball for a long time, like you. Only sport that I was like good at. I tried basketball. I was a decent goalie in soccer, but like I didn't care for soccer. Baseball was the thing. And then eventually stopped like during mid high school. And I just had a long time, especially after that I just didn't watch baseball at all. I had a lot of stuff going on. I had a kid at a young age, so, don't want to get like super like deep into stuff, but I had a kid at a very young age, like right out of high school. So, life turned into work. And, I was just, when I found the Mariners and, Cal's Rainmaker happened, all that, I was just at a point in my life where I'm like, I need something. And baseball's always been that first love. So it was just natural for me to get back into it. And I
would say, and sorry to interrupt, but I would say like, for me, you find new ways to fall in love with it even more.
Oh yeah.
Like for me, like I loved it to death. And obviously like Cal's home run happens, and that's another thing to fall in love with. And then, it just so happens that, a lot of people don't know, or most people should know this by now, but like I live in Toronto, and of all the places for the Mariners to play their first playoff series in like 20 years is Toronto. Like I felt like this is, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like
Did
hard
you
not
go to
to
game
believe in like
two?
destiny and stuff like that. Yeah, I went to both games. And I went
Dude.
with people from Mariners Twitter, which was really cool too. So, um, met some cool people over the course of that. Like, got to
Mhm.
celebrate with some people. Like, it was awesome. Like, I've
Yeah.
never really gotten to experience that, so that was sick. Like the
Yeah.
game one, just celebrating afterwards. Like seeing Luis Castillo dominate. Then game two, the way that game two went. I mean, that's one of the greatest playoff games of all time, not just for the Mariners, but just of all time. And when we're talking about
Mhm.
baseball, like one of the greatest comebacks ever in baseball history. I got to see that with my own eyes, like right there, like insane. So like stuff like that, it just makes you fall even more in love with the sport. It's definitely like different for everyone, right? It's a personal thing because like, for me, like another thing that had me fall in love with baseball, going back to when I was a kid, going back to that 2001 season.
Mhm.
I One of the first memories I have of going to a Mariners game was seeing Ichiro against Barry Bonds,
Dang, yeah.
like in 2001. Like
Nice.
it's insane. And I got to see Freddie Garcia pitch in that game too. Like it was sick. It was awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just like, and there's gonna be more stuff. I know things are not great right now, but
We can
like
hope.
there's gonna be more stuff that
Yeah.
makes me fall even more in love with the team, that makes me fall more in love with the sport. It's a magical sport. I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to describe it.
Well, when I was watching it a lot, it was like early 2010s, and as I said, I was raised a Giants fan, so I was there for the prime time of the early 2010s when they just won 3 World Series. So I got a bit spoiled in that, but when I saw Cal's home run and Game 2 against the Blue Jays, and I mean even as recent as this year with like JP's walk-off double against the Rangers, and we had a little bit of hope there. It reminded me of those moments that in my at least heyday of watching baseball, like it brought me back to Travis Ishikawa's walk-off homer against the Cardinals to send them the World Series, which is still my favorite Giants moment of all time, personally. And and watching those playoff games, I was like, it brought that back. It definitely brought that spark back. So, as much as the emotions behind the team are right now are, very low, I can't, they got me back into baseball, which is like the biggest gift so far. So
Yeah.
I can't, be too upset, but, I did want to touch on, and you mentioned the fans earlier and what's been going on right now. So, I mean, we will get into, the current day Mariners. So I have a couple questions about that. So obviously the last few months have been rough to say the least. We had a historic August, which was awesome. And then just September, we squandered both the division lead as well as our playoff chances, right? And then the PR disaster of 54% where you're doing us a favor. And then, so we have those 3 things. And then right after that, you trade away Gino, you trade away Kelenic for what felt like peanuts, right? Just it felt like a combination, like a boxing combination of just hooks after hooks to us as fans, right? But for you, as someone who both covers the team in a professional capacity, basically at this point, but you're still a fan at the end of the day. Like, how has this offseason personally for you affected you, and where do you view the club's image on the national scale, considering within the last year it's changed a lot?
I would say like the Mariners have always kind of been like the laughing stock of baseball. Like they're the Cleveland Browns of Major League Baseball, essentially. Like that's kind of what the narrative has always been. So like from the national side of things, I know like a lot of people on the national end have been excited about where this team has been going, and obviously Julio and all that. But I don't feel like too much has changed on that front. It's the Mariners being the Mariners. The Mariners are up in Seattle doing Mariners stuff. But yeah, for me, as like trying to balance being a fan and being an analyst and trying to create content and all that, it's hard. I mean, like you mentioned, like our subscriber count, like we just got to 10K. We just had our most viewed video on Sunday, which was the Kelnick trade, all that. Like that's great. Those are great milestones. I'm very proud of what we're doing, but also like it's hard to really celebrate that when everyone's just like hate watching and everyone's just, again, understandably, and I would say justifiably upset about what's going on. Like we can talk all about the practicality of the Mariners freeing up that money by dealing Kelnick, which is like, hopefully when we look back on this offseason, a smart move by the front office. But the fact that the front office was even forced to do that in the first place, very disappointing. Very hard to look at that any other way than in a very, very negative light. So, it's hard to like not let the fan base's anger rub off on you, and you become too blind, and then you just make your whole show like one note, essentially. Like, because like we've said this before, the payroll stuff is unavoidable. We have to talk about it, but we try not to talk about it so much because it just, even in years past, it dominates the conversation. Just flat out dominates the conversation. You see it on Twitter, you see it on the radio, all that stuff. There are other aspects of the Mariners, whether we want to address it or not, that should be talked about. Like, all right, well, now that we know that they only have so much money, what do they do? How do they work with that? How do they build the best ball club that they can possibly build? Like, how does Jerry and Justin build the best ball club they possibly can with the limitations that Stanton has put on them?
Yeah.
Right. So that, like, I always try to be very, like, Colby and I want to be very objective about that. At the end of the day, while we definitely have to hold Stanton and ownership's feet to the fire and hold them accountable, we also, the task at hand here is that we want to win baseball games. Like, we want to talk about baseball. Like, I don't want to every single, like, I said this on our Patreon, I despise John Stanton for making me look into TV deals and all this stuff. I don't care about that. I didn't get into this to talk about TV deals and what's going on with the regional sports networks. I don't know enough about that to talk about it, and I don't care enough to do enough research into that to start talking about it. I don't like, none of us should be required. And I know there's a lot of people that have done a lot of research and have put together some really good information on it, like Jage on Twitter, but like, we shouldn't even be required as baseball fans to like even to care about that, to even think about that stuff. So, I just want to talk about ball at the end of the day. And that's what we're ultimately, what we're always going to end up reverting to is just talking about ball, talking about, all right, well, which free agents, given their limitations, do make sense. And trying to look at it from that objective point of view. But it's hard, man. It's hard, because like, especially when, for us, because the locked on model is that we have to do a show every day, Monday through Friday, at least, for
usually
most of the year.
Yeah.
For the next couple of months, we're going to 3 shows a week, but yeah, having to do a show every day, it's hard not to get emotional sometimes. It's hard not to, like, because like it depends on your mood, and every day I'm going to be in a little bit of a different mood, and some things that might not irritate me on Monday might irritate me on Thursday, so it's hard to kind of just like manage that. And it's hard. Like, I do feel like sometimes there's like expectations on me or expectations on Colby or the both of us to act a certain way or react to a certain thing a certain way. And I don't want that to influence how I act, because quite frankly, it has in the past, and I regretted it afterwards, and I really wanted to delete the episode afterwards. And I have deleted a couple episodes afterwards, like, because I'm like a little bit after the fact, like a couple months down the line, where I'm just like, all right, I don't want, like, that's not how I want to do things. That's not how I want to operate things. That's not like, that's just, so it's just kind of like learning on the go too, right? You learn from your mistakes, and I've had to learn a lot of hard lessons over the last couple of years, but it is what it is.
Well, it feels like like you were saying, it feels like a lot of pressure, and I see it here and there in your comments and whatnot, kind of attacking you guys on a more personal level, right? For what you're talking about or not talking about, whether they want you to or not.
Right.
Like, do you feel like has it affected your mental health in general? Like, or is it kind of something where you have gotten a lot better over the time to block it out? Because that's certainly one of my biggest worries about doing this more often and kind of putting myself out there is that's going to be a big thing for me to learn. And I know sports fans, I mean, it's in the name fandom, right? Like people are insane about their sports teams, which I get it to an extent, but sometimes it definitely crosses a line. So
yeah, I mean, like it comes with the territory. I mean, a lot of this stuff has been, I mean, this is just typical sports fan behavior for years and decades and decades. So some of that, I mean, like with like the Jerry stuff, even if Jerry was like the greatest GM in the world, there would still be people that hated him, right? Because that's just like hating the GM. Like the GM is the villain always. Like the GM is all like the GMs, the owners, even if they're actually really good at their job, they're the villains no matter what. Like Brett Veach, the GM of the Chiefs, right? Like they just won 2 Super Bowls, right? And like, but they're, you know, the receiving course sucks this year, so like fire Brett Veach, and it's like, dude. Like this guy had built 2 Super Bowl winners. Like, what are you talking about? You know, so that comes with the territory, right? But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it does impact my mental health sometimes because it's like I got to be on Twitter in order to help essentially build the brand, right? To stay relevant, to keep eyes on me and the show, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna try to not do this as much, but the way to do this is to discourse, right? To enter the discourse, and you know, I try to do it as respectfully and try to acknowledge, you know, a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different aspects of a certain argument or a certain topic, but it still, you know, leads to people getting upset, right? Which like at a certain point you can't help that. People are going to get upset, especially when like I have like 10,000 subscribers and all this stuff. Like there's going to be a few weirdos in there. It's just going to happen, right? And there's going to be a few people that just like they're going to complain no matter what. They're going to have an issue with whatever you say. And I ignore that. Though like people get onto me about like reposting like certain like comments we get on YouTube. It's not that serious. Like I just like there's just some comments that are just so ass because I don't post a lot of the stupid stuff that we get, but like some of the comments are just so asinine. I'm like, dude, you guys got to see this. Like this is hilarious. Like, you know, and so that stuff doesn't bother me. It's usually when, and there's been a few instances of this when someone with like an actual platform who should know that like this is actually what I'm saying starts trying to get snarky with me. Like when we could just have like a discussion about it like in the DMs first and like maybe see like where one another stand before we start like sniping at one another. Like that stuff bothers me. That stuff actually like affects me because sometimes it's people that I actually respect and I actually respect their work and they're definitely not getting where I'm coming from. And it's weird that they just like jump from like 0 to 60, you know. It's like, hold on, let's have a discussion about this because like I'm a very neutral dude. I don't get too hot. And again, this goes back to like the conversation about like having other people influence how I react on the podcast because I am a very neutral person. And the times that I haven't acted super neutral is because I've been heavily influenced by the anger on Twitter or whatever. Right. So at the end of the day, I feel like I have a decent enough perspective with this that like at the end of the day, it's just baseball. To sports, it's just entertainment. I have like actual stuff to worry about in my life. There's actual stuff in the world to worry about that's like way more important than all of this, like you know. So but yeah, man, it sucks sometimes like when people like, again, people that have platforms that you respect are like coming at your neck a little bit, and it's just why because like I really don't care what Joe 5364 on Twitter says. I really don't. I don't give a shit. So but
that makes sense.
You know, but yeah, like there's some people where it's just like, what, why, like what's the what, no, like let's talk about this please. And then some of them are receptive to that, and some of them, you know, not so much. And you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. But yeah, it sucks sometimes.
Well, yeah, and just kind of, this is a bit piggyback from the question prior, and this was something that I've thought of here and there with, and going back to like the progression of all these things from basically September to now that have led to where we're at now. Do you think that if they had done a positive acquisition, like to break up this, that the general vibe of the team would be a lot different? Because I have a feeling that, you know, having basically 5 negative things in a row and without anything to break it up to be excited about is part of it. Like if they had acquired, let's say, a Solaire like 3 weeks ago, then we could at least be like, well, hey, like they did this though, and we can be excited about this possibility. But it just hasn't been that. And I mean, we know positive acquisitions are going to happen. Like they're not going to just keep it where they're at now. Like that's ridiculous to think that. So do you feel like that's part of it too? Is just the fact of they can't control the order in what these things happen, but I feel like that's played a role.
Yeah, I think you've probably heard Colby talk about that like, you know, there's just certain things on a baseball front office's to-do list that they just, when they have an opportunity to do it, they just have to do it, right? So I think look, I'm not going to make any guarantees because I have made guarantees in the past about this front office and then it hasn't happened. So I'm just going to say that I think that when this offseason is said and done, we're going to look back and say it was a sequencing issue. It wasn't actually that bad. It was just the order in which things happened that made it a whole lot worse. Because again, like you said, it's just one thing after the other. It's just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. Yeah. Like I remember when the Geno trade happened and I was talking to Jage and I were DMing and I was like, well, at least this is probably like the last weird thing they're going to do this offseason. And then the Kelnick trade happens and that's like, I was like just trying to enjoy my Sunday night and Colby texts me. He's like, Kelnick's been traded to the Braves. It's a salary dump. And I'm like, what? Oh,
please don't.
Yeah, like, dude, why? And I'm like, now I gotta do a show about this. Oh god, like I didn't even look at Twitter. Like I saw his text and I'm like, I already know how Twitter is reacting to this. I'm like, just tell me what the deal is. I'm gonna go get set up. Let's do the show and like whatever. So wow, yeah, that was insane. So I think it's just mostly a sequencing issue. Like you said, if you broke it up with like, here's Jorge Soler, then we would know like, all right, so they are going to spend some money. They are going to invest in a small club. I think it's really just like, there's a lot of doubt that's creeping into people's minds. And the further we get along into the offseason, because especially like this is a pretty a typical offseason for the Mariners because they've usually made a significant ad or two at this point in the offseason. Like they've been pretty active in the month of November in previous off seasons, and they haven't really done anything. Like they added Luis Urias, who I'm actually pretty high on the upside of, but that's a guy coming off of like a 50 WRC plus season and multiple injuries and all this stuff. Like
there's the doubt there.
Yeah, there's a lot of doubt there. There isn't like that's not a slam dunk at all. Like that's going to work. So yeah, like they need to bring in someone who's good now, who's established now, like whether that's Jorge Soler, whether that's Lourdes Gurriel, whether that's Randy Arozarena or Isaac Paredes or whoever. You just need one of those guys. I mean, shit, even if it's just Justin Turner, right? I think that would like do a lot for at least me. At least me. I mean, that's ultimately like what all I can care about is like, do I like that? Yeah. Okay, cool. Then great. So I would just, I would like something like that to happen here. And it seems like with, there's been some rumors here the last couple days, finally, about the Mariners. Like they're in on Soler, they're in on so-and-so, they're talking to the Royals potentially about pitching and all this stuff. So it's like, hopefully we're getting to a place here where they're finally going to make that move. And hey, the Mariners team store is closed today, so
I mean, apparently we offered $65 million, already. So I guess that happened. I woke up to that and I was just like, "Are we really taking this seriously?" I'm like, "There's no evidence at all." Like,
you're telling me that someone lied on the internet?
I know. Yeah.
What during the MLB offseason?
Yesterday was the worst. There was like multiple. I mean, the whole stuff with Morosi, like it felt like the whole day was just like one lie after another from everyone.
So let me tell you about my perspective of that. So yesterday, I took yesterday off because I need to get Christmas shopping done. And I always leave Christmas shopping to like the last minute. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But like, I need to just take a day off and just do that. Because I don't want to go to the mall when it's super busy. Plus, I live in a very populated area, being in Toronto and all that. So like, it gets busy, like floods of people.
I'm sure.
So I wanted to take the day off. So I'm like, I'm not checking Twitter, which is very rare for me. I'm not checking Twitter. I'm not looking at my phone at all this stuff. But then like I get a text from Colby saying like, oh, some guy from Dodger Nation said that Ohtani picked the Blue Jays. I'm like, and my first reaction was, you're not going to tell me that Dodger Nation, all due respect to Dodger Nation, that Dodger Nation is going to break the biggest free agent news of like the last century. Like,
yeah, literally.
no, yeah, like that's no, that's not happening. Like,
yeah.
So then I just put my phone away and like I tweeted out the show at like 3, and then like I saw some tweets about like I saw like MLB, like the official MLB account was like, oh, we're on Ohtani watch and all this stuff. But then I was just whatever. And then when I got home, I saw like everything that happened. I saw the Morosi tweet, which I have never seen an offseason go so like the only person having a worse offseason than the Seattle Mariners is John Morosi. John Morosi is having a god awful offseason. And I assume because like he apologized, right? He apologized last night. What is he apologizing for? I assume that he saw the Dodger Nation tweet and he's like, all right, I'm gonna put this in here that I heard that he's flying to Toronto or whatever his contribution to the situation was. Because again, I'm a little iffy on the timeline of everything. Yeah. But like that whole thing, like I tweeted this last night. I'm just waiting for like, we've talked all about the Dodgers and the Cubs and all these teams. And we go through the whole debacle of yesterday just for like Jeff Passan to like tweet like at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday that like, oh, Shohei Ohtani actually signed with the Marlins or the Giants or someone like that. Like, it's gonna be like, because I mean, like, look, we know about the secrecy of this whole situation. Like, why are we suddenly being led to believe that like, oh yeah, actually we have access to all this info? Like this is all concrete. Like we totally know what his motivations are when we like this stuff is like as secret as like the next Avengers movie. Like that's like the type of secrecy we're talking about here. And it's like, I don't buy anything until Jeff Passan says like, and that's the only dude I trust at this point. Like until Passan says Ohtani is signing here, definitively signing here, then I'll roll with it. But outside of that, I don't care what Dodger Nation has to say. I don't care what some dude that works in Vegas has to say, because like a lot of people put stock into those guys. It's a lot of people who like never break stuff ever. Yeah, that are like, oh yeah, I know where Ohtani's going. No, you don't. No, you don't. Like no. So
you have to imagine it's going to be a Rosenthal or a Passan. That like, I mean, it has to be one of those two. I feel like. To really break it.
Yeah, and that's like the only cope I have in terms of like maybe Ohtani could sign with the Mariners. It's like, well, like the only thing we've heard is from Passan saying that they blanched at the money, quote unquote. But it's like that's not coming from the Mariners. Like given what the narrative is around the Mariners right now, they would be morons to let that leak to like leak that to the media and like be like, yeah, you can report that, Jeff. Totally. Like no. And the fact that we haven't like they haven't made a concerted effort to like put out another leak that says, hey, we actually tried is a little sus to me, because I feel like they would want to try and at least control the narrative a little bit, or at least Stanton would like to control the narrative a little bit here. That's my cope though. That's my Ohtani cope.
Yeah. So. Well, I mean, we kind of need anything to feel like a little good at this point. I mean, it's possible. I personally don't even know if I believe the whole like we only have 30 million for the rest of the time. I mean, at the end of the day, these are all assumptions.
And I've gotten so many conflicting like I've been told so many conflicting things, because like I was told outright like they're really in on Yamamoto. And I was told that by someone that I really try. Like, this is someone that I don't get info from often, but would know, like, absolutely would know. And like the fact that they're in on Yamamoto, like they know what that's going to take. I know that's a very special situation because he's like 25 years old. He's basically an ace already. Like at 25 years old, that's very rare that you get an opportunity to sign that guy. So maybe it's a special budget for that. But like the fact that they were in on that tells me like they're at least willing to pay like $200 million to someone. Like,
yeah.
So, but then the Kelnick trade happens. So I don't know, man. I really don't.
Yeah.
And even like the messaging from Jerry is weird and kind of contradictory.
1.5 corner out. Like what does that even?
Well, there's that.
I mean, I
but
guess it's a platoon, but at the same time, like
there's that. There's the thing about the pitch trading the pitchers was less likely after the Kelnick trade than what? Like what?
Yeah.
What's going on here? So yeah, well, and then like he's doubled down on the whole like, oh, payroll is going to increase beyond 2023, but they just freed up payroll, and now he's like, well, and then you got Divish saying, well, they didn't have money yesterday, but now they have money, and it's like, but if they didn't have money yesterday, then that means that they wouldn't be able to exceed 2023. So what? So yeah, I'm not sure if there's like purposefully mixed messaging, if they're trying to like misdirect or mislead, or if people are just guessing right now, or if people in that front office are just not on the same page with one another, which is very possible, because I mean, you see Scott Service is literally sniping at John Stanton, which is wild. So I don't know what's going on. It's just weird. So I don't like, until we actually see like what kind of markets they're actually going to wind up getting into. Like if they do sign like a Jorge Soler, what does that look like? You know, until we see that, like I have no idea what they actually have to work with. It's hard for me to like buy into anything right now, because again, it's just nothing's adding up.
Yeah, well, it's been interesting for me because this is the first off season I've ever paid attention. Honestly, like I mean, when I used to watch, I mean, I was 10, so I mean, why am I watching the off season? And then I didn't last year because I was still getting into the team, so I just paid attention when they said did something. So this is the first time I've been paying attention, and it's just a whirlwind of. I don't know if this is usually how off seasons go, but I think a lot of it is with the Ohtani stuff. I mean, of course, I think we can all agree that this is going to be the biggest free agent signing in MLB history, just straight up. Like,
well, and that says to me that there are more teams in on him than we're led to believe, because why would they let Ohtani hang them up? I mean, maybe it's it's a two-way street, right? So maybe but also like Ohtani's his own market, so it's not like other players are waiting to see what Ohtani gets so I can demand X. Like, no. So again, something's just not adding up here. I don't know what. But we're definitely not getting anywhere close to the full picture, and we probably never will. But like,
maybe that's why Brian Reynolds was willing to re-sign, because he's going to be a Pirate this year. They told him, we're going after Ohtani. Those nukes with that amazing backdrop of Pittsburgh. I mean, Marco, I'm happy for him then.
Ohtani just really wanted to play with Marco Gonzalez, and therefore the Mariners blew their shot.
Exactly.
Fire Jerry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, so going into like Jerry and whatnot, one of the most interesting and also confusing parts of this off season has been the developments between our narrative around Jerry DiPoto as well as the ownership group, and who is kind of taking the collective blame for where we're at now. I would say before the winter meetings, I think everyone was on the hate Jerry train. I mean, granted, we've always said the ownership all throughout the season, but at the same time, it felt like with the stuff that broke during the winter meetings with the RSN network and Jerry alluding to like his budget being slashed at the last minute, the narrative switched from DiPoto bad to like, oh, he's just getting handicapped, and actually this is all the ownership, right? So I was hoping to kind of talk about like that. I just felt like it was very interesting how there's now like sympathy for DiPoto when there really wasn't, like all year.
Which is like it's nice to see. It's a breath of fresh air, because for so long now, Jerry DiPoto, Justin Hollander, they are not above criticism. There is a lot to criticize them about, like the trade deadline. That's a Jerry thing. That's a Justin Hollander thing. Like absolutely, like 100%. You should drag them. You should break them over the coals for that. 100%. But like a lot of the stuff that I see people criticize Jerry for, it's not Jerry's fault. And it's sometimes people with actual platforms who influence the fan base, who are telling them like, oh, Jerry is cheap. Jerry's not cheap. Jerry's not looking to do his old pal John Stanton a favor. Jerry wants to build the best ball club possible, but Stanton only, if Stanton's only going to give him $20 million to work with, he has to do whatever he can to best maneuver that. Now, that's where we can start criticizing Jerry again. Is he actually the best person to maneuver that? Is he the best person to work within those confines? What does he do within those confines? That's all fair. And that should absolutely, we should absolutely criticize Jerry if he struggles, and that, like he did this past off season. If the front office struggles like they did this past off season, where Teoscar Hernandez didn't really work out, Colton Wong was a disaster, AJ Pollock was a disaster. Like, that's all front office, right? But in terms of they didn't spend X, Y, or Z, or they didn't trade X, Y, or Z because of how the money plays into it all that, that's an ownership thing. That's an ownership thing. That's John Stanton. So it's nice to see people criticizing the front office for the right things and the ownership group for the right things instead of the other way around. And hopefully that continues. Hopefully a lot of people have perspective now. I think it was really just they needed to see that Jerry is also on the fan base's side. This sucks. And he's tired of it. And now Jerry hasn't been shy from speaking out against the higher ups of the organization. When the Kevin Mather thing happened, obviously you weren't a fan around this time, but
no, I've tried to do some research about that a little bit.
But when the Kevin Mather thing happened, Jerry and Scott stuck up for the players and spoke out against Kevin Mather. It was very that was really cool to see. So they've been willing to do that. But obviously, Jerry, I mean, part of the territory of being a president of baseball operations or GM or whatever is taking some of the arrows for your ownership. That's just what it is. That's the part of the territory for anyone. But it's gotten to a point now where the 54% thing, right? That's obviously a Jerry thing. We should absolutely criticize Jerry. I get what he's saying. And it does make sense. When you really peel back the layers, it does make sense from just a baseball theory standpoint and all that stuff. But most people don't care about that stuff. You should read the room, especially after the way that September went. Read the room. Just say, we need to get better. We want to win a World Series. I need to do better. Justin needs to do better. Scott needs to do better, etc. And that's it. And just move on. He didn't do that. He more tried to spin it in a way that's well, you guys don't really get it, Yeah. And that's not. But also, John Stanton should have been up there too. And John Stanton was in that room. He was just behind the cameras. He needed to be up there as well. And he needed to stop Jerry from putting his foot in his mouth and show true leadership as the owner, as the true face of Mariners leadership. That's what Stanton should have done there. So, it's just Jerry is definitely getting tired of it. You can see it. In the way that, especially at the winter meetings, and the way that Scott, because also Scott and Jerry, they talk Scott and Jerry are tied at the hip, they're homies. So whatever Scott's saying is definitely what Jerry's feeling too. And Scott was a bit more outright about it than Jerry was, but you can tell that Jerry's starting to get pissed off a bit because he's saying certain things that he typically doesn't say. And he's open about things that I know he's very open about a lot of stuff, but he's getting open more about payroll and stuff like that when he really hasn't done that. And he's making less excuses and doing less mental gymnastics to try and cover up for Stanton, which he's done in the past. Last year when he said the whole crest thing, oh yeah, it's going to crest in 2026. That was him trying to cover up for Stanton, essentially. Because I'm not going to get enough money. I need to think about, extending George Kirby and Cal Raleigh and how expensive all of those things are going to get. And that's what the crest comment was. A lot of people saw it as pushing the goalposts. That's not what it was. He was just saying things are going to get very expensive for us in a couple of years. I have to think about that. So I can't just handcuff myself to this massive deal, because then that means we're probably going to have to trade Logan Gilbert, or we're going to probably have to trade Cal Raleigh, and maybe they still have to do that stuff because of what Stan's doing. But that's all a Stanton thing. That's all Jerry DePoto's not going to just trade good players for no reason. Jerry he might not be the best GM in the world, and I know he has a lot of detractors. Jerry is a smart baseball guy. He is, absolutely. Does he make bad trades? Yeah, everyone does. Especially when you have these limitations on you, it opens up the door more for you to mess up. it opens up the door for more mistakes, for more bad trades, for more bad deals, stuff like that, when you have less wiggle room. So that's going to happen. But ultimately, like, the Mariners have, in my mind, one of the best front offices in all of baseball, one of the best, especially from like a drafting standpoint. Amazing. And that's the thing too that drives me insane when people talk about firing Jerry. You're not just talking about firing Jerry. You're not just talking about firing Justin. You're talking about firing the scouting department, particularly the amateur scouting department, because whoever comes in is going to want their own guys. Like, that's just how it goes. So you're giving up way more than just Jerry when you do that. And so, well, I'm not saying that, well, you shouldn't do it because of that. I'm just saying that needs to be considered, and a lot of people definitely don't consider that. It's just like, maybe think about that before you say definitively they should get rid of this guy and all that stuff. So I just feel like the discourse around Jerry has been very like inaccurate. It's just, it hasn't,
starting to come back down to earth a little bit.
It's starting to finally see the bigger picture of things. And like I said, it's a breath of fresh air, because it's been frustrating, because like, and whenever like I try to say like, no, it's actually this, I get called a bootlicker or whatever. And it's like, dude, I've dragged Jerry on the show. Like, Jerry might not want to ever come back on our show because of some things that I've said. I don't know. Like, I haven't reached back out or anything like that. I don't have any concrete information on that. I'm just saying though, like, it's possible that Jerry doesn't even like us. Like, if he knows like some of the things that we've said about him, like, so I'm definitely not being a bootlicker here. Like, I'm just trying to be fair. At the end of the day, I want to win baseball games. I want to see my team win a World Series. And, I'm going to say how I feel about that, about certain decisions that are made or certain things that happen. So,
that makes sense. Well, and so this goes back to kind of earlier when I said, I'm a newer fan coming into this, and trying to make content about the Mariners and whatnot. And that requires me to try to learn as much as I can about the team and who's in it. Still working on like minor leagues and whatnot, and still learning how to read statistics and savant pages, getting there. But for someone who is a newer fan coming into it, who wants to be a Mariner fan, but they see everything that's going on. And in my opinion, super complicated organization, super complicated, really to navigate what's going on right now and why it's happening. Like, what advice would you give to a newer fan within the last year or two to kind of keep their head above water with everything that happens with this team? Because it's just insane how much it is.
Always question things. Always ask why. Why is that happening? Again, this goes back to the conversation that we just had about Jerry. Why did Jerry trade Jerry Kelnick? Why did he feel the need that he had to trade 5 years of club control of a guy that was once thought to be potentially the face of the franchise in the future, just to get rid of the contracts of Marco Gonzalez and Evan White? Why did that happen? Or like when we're talking about the Ohtani stuff, right? Why is this information leaking? Who told Jeff Passan that the Mariners blanched at the money? What is the purpose of that? Would that actually be the Mariners saying that, considering everything that's going on with them right now? Probably not. So like, that's, I think from that perspective, when you're just kind of talking about like the motivations of certain things, always ask why. Always ask why. There's almost certainly always a deeper reason for these things. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to get the answers, right? But it means that there's probably a bigger picture here that we don't see, and we're probably never going to see. But it's not a very simple thing, right? Sports fandom in general, like when we analyze things, a lot of the time it's black and white. It's like the trade discourse, right? Whenever a trade is made, this team won and this team lost. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. Most teams get nothing out of a trade. Like most trades end up like where it's just nothing for either team. Some teams, some teams win, some teams lose those trades. Sometimes, and this is how trades are supposed to work, both teams win. And sometimes that you don't see that value until like 7 years down the road, like the Mitch Haniger trade, for example, right? Mariners traded Taijuan Walker and Ketel Marte to the Diamondbacks for Mitch Haniger and Gene Segura. It looked like they killed that trade. Like they got the more immediate value, but now Ketel Marte was a postseason legend for the Diamondbacks, you know?
Yeah.
but also Gene Segura helped them get JP Crawford, who's like the captain of the team right now. So there's so much context, and there's so like my thing, and it's so weird to say this as someone that's a podcaster and part of a network where they're like, you need to react to everything, you need to have a big thing, but it's like, don't react so quickly. Think about things, think about why things, or think about how this all makes sense, and maybe wait and see on certain stuff. It's like this off season, right?
Yeah,
this off season, you know, and I said this last year and it didn't really come to fruition, but look, at the end of the day, like, not a ton of people have signed yet. We're still a couple of months away from pitchers and catchers reporting. A lot can happen in the next 8 weeks. A lot can happen. It could completely change our feelings on the off season. Does that mean that I think that's going to happen? No, but who knows, right? So, you know, because it's just like we could say one thing in December, but they could go sign Shohei Ohtani, right? We could say like, you know, and again, not saying that that's likely, but they could do that. And then, well, what was the whole point of getting all upset, you know, a couple of weeks ago? Like, it's just, so that's my thing. I know that's not how a lot of people are going to operate. I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't like that answer. I don't care, first of all. but secondly, I do think it is important to try and stay neutral with certain things, especially with baseball is such a complicated sport, and baseball is it's a very random sport too, where just some things happen and they don't make sense. Like Colton Wong last year. Colton Wong, like, yeah, if he regressed, fine. Like, there were a lot of people that were like, oh yeah, he's a lateral move from Adam Frazier. Dude, I would take a lateral move from Adam Frazier. Like, if Colton Wong was just a 96 WRC plus guy this past year, or whatever Adam Frazier finished 2022 as, the Mariners probably in the playoffs. Maybe the Rangers are not in the playoffs, let alone the World Series champions. You know, there's like the fact that Colton Wong was like 100% worse than he was in 2022 coming off of a career year, like, that's just random. Like, that's just stuff that even the best GMs, the best baseball execs cannot foresee happening. And just, you know, that stuff happens. Like, I think that's the other thing too, is like recognizing that in baseball shit happens. That's just the answer is just as simple as that. It's not like you need to fire X, Y, and Z, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. It's just shit happens, you know?
Yeah, I saw a Twitter post or a Twitter poll the other day saying, like, if the Mariners in 2024 made the postseason, like, would you even want them to make the postseason? As, like, if they didn't, or if they did, like, that would embrace the spending and whatnot.
It would enable them. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, if they make it in the postseason, we just saw it with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Anything can happen. They could go on that, you know, Cinderella run and win the World Series. And, like, I'm sorry, but, like, would you rather take a World Series ring, or, you know, the front office or the ownership that you don't agree with feeling a bit more confident about what they do? Like, I'm sorry, I'm taking the ring.
Right. Yeah. No, like, at the end of the day, like, I say this a lot because there's a lot of people out there that are like, no, you need to spend this number, and it doesn't matter what that looks like. You just have to spend that number. It's like, they should be willing to spend that number. They don't have to spend that number. But, like, if it makes sense, like, if they are going to allow that number to keep them from adding this player who could really help them, then that's a problem. Right.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you end up building a ball club that only costs you $40 million, but they're all really good at baseball, and you're going to win a World Series, or you're going to compete for a World Series, or I can look at that roster and say, yeah, they can absolutely do that. I don't care. Like, I want to win baseball games. Like, the Mets just spent $300 million on their roster, and they sucked this year, and then they had to sell at the deadline. Like, there's no guarantee that you're going to spend money and that's going to lead to championships. Obviously it helps. You look at the Rangers, I mean, that really helped them, but they spent money when it made sense for them, except for the DeGrom deal. I think the writing was on the wall with the DeGrom stuff, but, like, whatever. But, like, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, that made sense for them to do, and it helped them win a championship, right?
Well, and so for the Mariners, Diaz was homegrown, so he was.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? Evan Carter came up, and that was a guy that they drafted, and he just came up late in the season, and he was amazing. He was a massive part of that run, you know. So there's, like, a lot of other things went very well for them. I mean, Leody Taveras took another step. Travis Jankowski, who was on the Mariners not even like 2 years ago, gave them something this year. Like, a lot of stuff still has to go right for you. It's not just you spend money and therefore you automatically get into the postseason and you automatically compete for a World Series. That just doesn't happen. Look at the Padres now.
Yeah, I was supposed to say Padres.
And the Padres are a very good example of this because they're not a big media market, and they tried to spend like a big media market and it blew up in their face, right? So like if you try, like that's the other thing too, is like if you want the Mariners to try and pretend that they're big boys when they're probably not, no, there's no guarantee that it's going to work. So yeah, like the whole like, do you even want them to spend because it enables them? No one's thinking about that. No one, even the person that made that poll, they're not going to be thinking about that if the Mariners have won 94 games and they won the division and they're competing for the World Series. Like,
you're not going to be sitting at the first World Series home game in T-Mobile Park history and being like, John Stan's head is getting really big. This is not okay. Like, no, you're going to be as excited. I mean, we saw Game 3 last year. Like, the vibes are insane. If we can,
and there was
have
discourse
a
like this that off season. That off season, like until they traded for Jesse Winker and Gino Suarez, and like even then, because like Gino Suarez was coming off of 2 really bad years, so like people were like, well, that's stupid. Why are you putting him at third base? And all that. Like, I remember people are very quick to forget, but the discourse around that offseason was bad. Very, very, very bad. There was payroll discussions almost every single day. All of that stuff. Yeah. They ended up winning 90 games. They broke the longest playoff drought in professional sports. They won a playoff series. They went toe to toe with the eventual World Series champions. Like, they had a very, very good year. And, it's just like, again, no one's going to care. Like at the end, like really, like let's be real with ourselves. You are not going to care that John Stanton is being enabled if the Mariners are hoisting the World Series trophy in November.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah. So I promised you I was going to ask you some music questions, but the last Mariners question I have for you.
Sure.
And just to change it a bit, what are you optimistic for right now for 2024 for this Mariners team?
The pitching staff. I mean, look, Yamamoto hasn't signed yet. So and I was told that they were in on him. So
you think he'd be the 1 or 2? Probably the 2, right?
Like, I mean, ultimately that stuff doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but like I think like if we're looking at it from like an opening day perspective, I think Castillo probably still gets the ball on opening day, but like Yamamoto is probably the best talent in that rotation. Like he's like the true ace, quote unquote. But like if they added Yamamoto on top of Gilbert, Kirby, Castillo, that's like one of the greatest rotations of all time, or at least the potential to be one of the greatest rotations of all time. So I'd be very excited to see that. But even without him, we're talking about already a top 3 rotation of baseball. We're talking about a top 5-ish pitching staff in all of baseball. Like they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I think we're going to see Bryce Miller take a step forward. I think we're going to see Brian Wu take a step forward. So that's also, that just makes that whole unit a little bit better. And I think, at least I hope, that they're going to be able to sustain that a little bit longer than they, because they kind of ran out of gas there towards the end. So, so that's exciting. I mean, Julio, obviously, we have one of the greatest players in baseball right now playing for our favorite baseball team. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, you need to trade him so you don't waste his prime. Shut up. I want Julio Rodriguez.
Ridiculous.
I want Julio Rodriguez here. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to trade him so we don't waste his prime or whatever. We have, like, to me, the closest thing we've seen to Derek Jeter and JP Crawford. Nice. I think he's kind of like the modern day Derek Jeter, like, which is really cool to have, because I like Derek Jeter. I know there's a lot of discourse around Derek Jeter and like the defense and all that stuff. I think Derek Jeter is a really good player. I was a big Derek Jeter guy growing up, so like having someone like that with JP, and I know it's only been 1 year, but like I think the offense is sustainable. Maybe not to the level that he did this year, but I think he's going to be a good bat. Obviously, highlight. Like just a walking highlight reel at shortstop. He's a fun player, so like excited to watch JP Crawford. So yeah, there's and Cal, obviously Cal's so fun, and I know that they're going to do something this offseason. I know that they're going to my thing would be like the thing I would probably get the most excited about that I think is like actually, I mean, obviously Otani, but like of the things that I think are actually feasible, Randy Rosarena would be so sick on this
Oh
team,
yeah,
like so sick. Like
yeah.
paired with Julio, the energy that those two would create, oh my god, that would be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, well, I think they did a great job with when it comes to Julio. One of the games I went to this year, I sat in the J Rod squad just to because I wanted to try it out, and I think they did a really good job with how they, I won't say market and made that J Rod squad section and whatnot, but I mean you can
Yeah,
just see it when you're at the game. Like everyone in those sections, like it is like a feverish love for that guy. It is, he's interacting with the crowd. You can tell he loves the fans. He loves Seattle. I cannot see how you could reasonably be okay with trading him. I mean, I guess you could be all worried that we'll become the next Angels and ruining a
the same
Trout or
people that
Otani, but
the people
no,
that want to trade Julio to not waste his prime or whatever are the same people that are like, well, do you actually want to make the playoffs this year because it might
yeah,
enable Johnson? It's the same
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to be it for our Mariners questions. And I told you I was going to ask you about some music stuff because I'm
Hell yeah.
also a lover of music.
Yeah.
I don't listen to hip hop and rap too much, but at the same time, music is music. It doesn't really matter.
For real.
So for people who are listening who don't know, Ty's came out with a couple different albums. Both are on Spotify, which I'll have links to below. The first one came out in 2020. It was a self-titled. He goes by the alias of Waldo Springtime. And then the second one was released this year on September 17th, Sunrays Over the Duke. So I guess the most general question I have about music for you is what's your motivation for making it and making that leap from listener to producer and rapper and making
Yeah.
it yourself?
When I was like really getting into music, like because I was kind of a late bloomer when it came to music, but when I really started getting into music and started listening to guys like Kid Cudi, I was like, I want to do that. That would be
Yeah.
cool to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really as simple as that. It's also like right now, especially, I think it's even more important now than ever that I have like a creative outlet that isn't this, that isn't
Yeah.
talking about baseball, that isn't talking about the Mariners. Like this wasn't the vision that I had for myself, like I didn't
Mhm.
like I wasn't like I want to be a podcaster talking about the Mariners, like I love the
Yeah.
Mariners, but like I didn't want to like that wasn't like not saying that I don't want to do it. I enjoy doing it, but it's just like that's not really like what I had in mind for myself. It just kind of happened. It just kind of
Yeah.
just came together all of a sudden. But I wanted to do something creative. I used to make album artwork on a Kanye West forum back when I was like 18
Nice.
and would like get paid to do it. Like I wanted to do something like that. And I actually like would talk to some artists who actually are kind of doing stuff right now. Like Brockhampton.
Nice.
I don't know if you've heard of
I know who
Brockhampton.
that is. Yep.
They came together on that Kanye West forum, and like I talked to Kevin Abstract a couple times. He's like the front man for them, and like I've talked to him a couple
Mhm.
times about like doing some art, and like I've talked to like their album art guy HK, and like we like swapped like texture packs and stuff like that, for
Nice.
like graphic design, so
Yeah.
um yeah, so like I wanted to always like do something like that, and I've always loved music, and I've always loved the individuality of music and the expression of music, and how it literally doesn't have to be there is no set rules for music. It's just
Yeah.
a sandbox. It's amazing. And I listen to a lot of different artists who inspire me, and I'm the type of person that likes to really get deep into the weeds with the artists that I listen to and consume as much about those artists as possible. And so, and having the context of like their personalities and their interests and their influences and all that stuff, really like inspires me. Um,
Mhm.
and so, uh, yeah, so I basically just wanted to take my influences and put that into something creative for me, and that's where I'm doing music now, I'm doing music like super unprofessionally. I'm like doing it on this microphone, which is not a good microphone to record music on, but it's, it is what it
Yeah.
is. And I don't have producer connections. I don't know anyone that makes music.
Yeah.
If you listen and you make music, has to be good. But if you're listening and you make
Yeah.
music, would love to hear from you. But like I go on YouTube and I listen to producers on YouTube and I buy beats and make music with those beats essentially. And I like writing, but like I also want to, like, the thing is, like, I would make my own music. It's really fucking expensive though.
It's
like
insane.
like
Yeah.
drum machines are like $300 or $3,000 and all this stuff. Like good microphones are like $1,000. Like it's a very, very expensive thing to get into. I know, like, once you have it forever, but still it's
Yeah.
a like biting the bullet is a big thing. So but yeah, so I've just kind of wanted to put together some proof of concepts that I can do it, and hopefully the right person hears it eventually and is like, hey, like, I like what you're doing and I think you're talented, and like let's make some music. So that's pretty much what it
Yeah.
is. And also, like, I like making music for my friends to listen to, because this is all that, like, the first Waldo Springtime was literally for me and like 7 people.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's just how I
That's how
even
it
if
has to
that's just
start
what it,
though.
but even if that's just all it was, like, that was cool to me. It was like my friends liked it,
Yeah.
and that's all I cared about, and that's all I still care about, is like even when I put Sunrays Over the Duke on Twitter a while back, I was just like, I think this is good, but I don't know how many people are actually going to think that as well. Like, it might just be me who thinks that's good, and like my friends are just being nice to me or whatever. But like, here,
Yeah.
like, I made this. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I don't really care.
Yeah.
It's not like I'll be real, like, it's not a huge thing for me, but I like doing it. It's a way for me to be creative. It's a way for me to express myself in a very different way. And now that people have said, like, yeah, they actually like it, they actually fuck with it a little bit, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm actually good at this stuff. Maybe I should do more of it. Maybe I
Yeah.
should actually pursue it a little more seriously. And so now that's kind of what I'm hoping to do. But still, I don't really have the connections nor the money to really, really put together like an amazing project. It's mostly still just like paying, 20 or $30 for like a license for a beat so I can
Yeah.
put it on Spotify.
Yeah, no, I've experienced that a little bit too. Like I grew up going to a lot of concerts. I was really big into the EDM space. That's kind of where I really gained my passion for music as well. And it still is like an EDM, which I'm not talking like, clubby type stuff. I'm a lot more into like more like left field experimental stuff right now. And I grew up on dubstep, which is, cringy to say now a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every Boots and Cats, joke I've ever gotten, it's be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I over the last couple of years, I've tried to like dip my toe into producing on my own too, and I mean, it's not gotten anywhere. It's not anything I'm like, oh, I would actually post this, whatever. It's always been, sending to friends, being like, hey, or friends who have made music, being like, hey, just tell me if this is like a good foundation, But
and even that is great, man. Like, even if you're
yeah.
just like doing it for you, which
Mm-hmm.
I have hundreds of songs on my laptop that like will never see the light of day. Hundreds
Yeah.
and hundreds of ideas out there that like will never ever see the light of day. But I did it for
Mm-hmm.
me. I tried things, right? And I've
Yeah.
tried to like branch out and like start like singing a little bit and stuff like that. And I'm not a good singer, but I can carry a tune fairly well. And like, again, like, I love Kid Cudi, right? Kid Cudi's
Yeah.
not a great singer, but he has a cool, unique voice, and he does some really cool stuff with his voice and uses it more so as like an instrument rather than like traditional vocals. And I like that, and I'm very inspired by that, and I'm influenced by that, and I try to apply that to my own music, right? So that kind
Yeah.
of goes back into the whole like influence thing. So yeah, so that's just kind of like taking risks, trying new things, and not really putting any sort of expectations or pressure on myself, because it's just fun, and it's like maybe only like my 5 or 7 friends will listen to this, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I something I've observed in myself when I compared to when I used to go to concerts just for the sheer enjoyment of it, and I still enjoy it now. Ever since I have like done it a little bit on my own in my free time here and there. Now when I go to concerts, I feel like go to it and observe it in a different way, where I'm really
Mm,
trying to gain that inspiration. I'm really like listening to every part of the song and all the different elements, because especially as someone who tries to do like EDM stuff, uh, I have to know every layer that goes into that. Like I'm not going to just be a
right.
singer, right? Like I'm listening to the drum pattern, the bass line, like everything that goes on to it. So do you kind of feel the same way with like you consume it differently now?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, when I go to concerts, like I take some influence for just how to do the podcast, like crowd working and stuff like that actually like
Hmm.
really influences me and helps me sometimes. Seeing how people, because I also get really in my head about how I like interact with listeners and stuff like that, and I get very like self-conscious about that stuff, but like seeing how I've gone to a couple concerts lately. Like I went to see Faye Webster. I don't know if you've ever listened to Faye Webster, but
No, I
she
haven't.
makes great music. But she like the way that she just kind of like interacted with the crowd, and it was kind of awkward, but it was cool. Like at the end, like it
Yeah.
wasn't a huge deal, and like getting like that allows me to have more perspective about me and how I kind of operate in terms of just having these like personal type of connections, like personal moments with people and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so that helps me in that regard, but also yeah, like listening to music is very different. Like the thing that I really hyper focus on is mixing, audio mixing, because
Oh, yeah.
especially because like I'm not making the music myself.
Hmm.
I'm rapping or I'm singing and I'm writing and I'm mixing all of it myself. So that's what I really focus on,
Yeah.
is like how did so and so flip that syllable in that verse, like how did he do that, or how did they layer these two vocal tracks on top of one another, and how did they uh like use the reverb on like how did they make it sound like that kind of like packed into the track and all that. So
Yeah.
and I just kind of like I'll listen to something and then I'll go back
Mhm.
to one of my old like projects in GarageBand and I'll just start like fucking with it and seeing like if it if I can kind of replicate that and see like if that works for me and just kind of like learn. Like I'm very much self-taught. I don't look up a lot of
Same.
tutorials and stuff like that. I just kind
Yeah.
of like vibe out basically,
Hmm.
and it's worked for me more so. Like I think I have like a good grasp on it now. And like,
Yeah.
well, and also like everyone's voice is so different, and it like you have to mix everyone's voice very differently from one another. So it's like I found what works for me in particular. Like I couldn't like mix like if you like did a track for me or whatever, like I couldn't. I would have to completely like refigure out how I would like mix your voice and all that stuff. But like
Yeah.
for me, I know what works for my voice and what works for like the music that I do. And so yeah, so it's just kind of like learning on the fly, figuring stuff out. And the thing that I really learned is like before you put something out, like really sit on it and like leave it for like a week and then come back to it after like a week and listen to
Yeah.
it, and like does it still sound good? Because like there's some times where like I'll listen to something, I'm like, dude, this is sick, and like I'll just listen to it over and over and over again after I made it, but then I come back to it like a week later, I'm like, this sucks, this is garbage, what the hell
Yeah.
was I thinking? Like this is mixed like ass, like this sucks. Like so
Yeah.
there's that too. So like I try to not jump the gun so much because I get excited too. Like I want to like I make something and I'm like, oh god, I
Oh, yeah.
gotta show my
I've
friends.
been
Like
there.
I gotta upload this to SoundCloud. Like here, listen to this
Yeah.
shit. And it's like, dude, it sucks.
Yeah. Well, something you said about the Faye Webster concert that I thought was reminded me of my own experience when you were just talking about kind of like that intimacy of that interaction. Another, other than the way I listen to the music when I go now, I've realized that like I used to want to go to like the EDCs, like the insane huge
Yeah.
festivals and whatnot. And it's like now I'm so much more attracted to like those, at least for me, those really dark, not cramped. I wouldn't say that because I'm a big guy,
No.
so I hate being cramped. But smaller venues where it's like there's a venue near me who they do this thing called a 360 set where the DJ decks are in the middle of the floor and the crowd
Mm,
surrounds the DJ. And I went to one of those recently, and even then, it was just like it was fun for me to like watch how they mix. I was able to see it, like
yeah.
watch the decks, and then just it felt that more personal. I felt a lot more being able to focus on the songs and breaking them down in my head, and it just was really nice. Whereas like if I went to a huge festival, I mean, I'm gonna have fun, but I'm not gonna be listening deeply as I would be, you know.
Well, and a lot of
So
people aren't, because a lot of people that go to festivals are getting high as hell, and they're like, just having a good time. Like they're just looking to party, right? Like they're not looking to like, have a connection with the artist or anything like that.
No,
Yeah. So I really prefer like those more intimate settings as well. There's a really Drake bought this venue in Toronto called History, and he renovated it and all this stuff fairly recently, and I think it's a really good balance of having like like it looks very modern, it's very hoity-toity and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also still, it's intimate, but it's spacious, but it still has that very like dark, intimate setting where you do feel connected to the artist, and the acoustics are fantastic, and the lighting is great in there, and all. It's a really nice setting, and I think that, I don't know if it was actually Drake who like organized all of that. Maybe he just bought the place and he hired people to like put that all together, but whoever designed that and organized that, I think is a genius. Like I think it's really, really, really well done with what they did over at History. That's pretty much where I go to see shows now, exclusively.
So I've just thought it's been really interesting over the years as I've grown up, and the way I see music differently than I did when I was 18. Right. Like, and I mean, I'm only 25, so I can't be like, oh, I'm so old now. But even just the last few years, it's been such a weird change of how I listen to music, even not even just at concerts, but just on when I'm listening by myself on Spotify. You get that I'm examining everything, and but I've loved it a lot. And so when I was listening to your music, I listened to both of them. First of all, when you're talking about the mastering, the first thing that came to mind is I think Sunrays Over the Duke was a lot. I could tell there was a lot more improvement from the self-titled in the mixing, and it sounded a lot cleaner in that way. But a couple of like, and I'm not a Fantano, right? So I was trying to listen to like the narratives that you were talking about and whatnot. So a couple of things I was able to like catch from your songs there was there's quite a few references to like substance use as like an escape, mainly like marijuana, it sounded like. And guilt and bitterness specifically, it seemed like there was like a childhood trauma, abusive mother type thing going on there, or at least the first half of the song was talking about like a love interest, but then it switched to more of a motherly figure and kind of that resentment, and using
it's actually not the first verse is actually not about a love interest. It's about my dad. It's about my dad.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. See, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because obviously you can specify this more and whatnot. So, and then 27 Club, I think, really hit me the most because it was that general feeling of someone in their mid-20s feeling lost, unsatisfied about where they're at in life. I definitely connected a lot to that, so yeah, I guess as far as the narratives in Sunrise Over the Duke, like just kind of going more into what inspired you for those to talk about those things.
All right, so I'm gonna go all the way back real quick, and then I'll more specifically answer. So when I was like, I told you I was a late bloomer with music. So like when I was like still living in Washington, basically, I didn't really have access to the internet in Washington. I just like I listened to what was on Cube 93, and that was like the shoddy era of like hip hop and stuff. It was T-Pain, it was all that stuff. And like like that stuff has its value. I still listen to that stuff sometimes, just kind of ironically, but I there's some value to it.
Of course.
But when I got to New Mexico and I started expanding my music taste, and I met my best friend. His name is Salty.
Nice.
Salty got me on.
Is that his government name or his nickname?
That is not his government name, but we call him Salty. We do not call him anything else other than Salty. Salty is the legend. Love Salty. But Salty got me into like rappers like Afu Ra and like more lyrical rappers, right? Like and even stuff like very like surface level stuff like Biggie and Tupac and stuff like that. I started listening to more. And then I discovered Kid Cudi. Right, Day and Night was huge. Like in 2008, like right as soon as I moved to New Mexico, Day and Night popped off. Everyone's heard Day and Night, I'm sure.
Yeah.
By this point. So I heard that, and like I hear like, oh, he's Kanye's new artist and all this stuff, and like I'm like, all right, let me check this guy out. And I really like Man on the Moon 1, but then I heard Man on the Moon 2. Man on the Moon 2 is, you can see it right there. I have all 3 Man on the Moons back there. You can't really see it on my webcam, but Man on the Moon 2 is my favorite album of all time. Will always forever be my favorite album of all time. I don't care what else comes out from here on out for the rest of my life. It will always be my favorite album of all time. Yeah. Hearing him be, because this was at a very, and again, I get very deep into like my artists that I listen to and listen to interviews with them. He was in a very dark place at the time that he was making that album. He was heavily doing coke and like all this stuff. Like it was bad. Like it was really bad. Yeah. Like he got arrested at one point for like losing his shit and all this stuff. Like he was going through it. But the fact that he was vulnerable, that he was open, and also keep in mind, this is like 2010. Very different day and age we live in now with like talking about mental health and all this stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You did not, especially in hip hop, you did not talk about this stuff. So like Cudi talking about this stuff was wild. Was fucking wild. And hearing him talk about that stuff, and because like the rap music for the most part, like before then, that was like not bling and all that stuff, was just like the miracle, lyrical, spiritual, all that stuff. Like that's like what that was, which is like cool. Like I like that stuff a lot. Like I like New York rap and all that stuff a whole ton. Like awesome. But like hearing Cudi like actually like open up about some real stuff, talk about what he's going through. Yeah, he's not the most lyrically gifted guy or whatever like that, but that stuff just inspired the hell out of me. And the way that he blended like rock music into like indie rock and stuff like that into hip hop, like no one was doing what he was doing back then. And so I've always wanted to do something very open and honest. And like, like I don't want to give everything about my life away. So like some of it is like embellished, or some of it is just like it's a story that's more like influenced by certain things that happen in my life, rather than like here's like the full like breakdown of my entire life.
It's not a biography of you necessarily.
Right. Like it's like the character is Waldo Springtime, but there is a lot of influences about my life that go into it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. I mean, 27 Club, I don't know if you're familiar with what the 27 Club is, but like Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, they all died at the age of 27. I turned 27 this year, and so it's not like oh, I'm gonna die and what was me and all that stuff. But it's like I'm 27, like a lot of like legends who lived forever like died at this age, and I feel like I haven't done shit, and like I feel like I'm just kind of like figuring stuff out, and that's kind of like what the inspiration was for 27 Club, and I just kind of feel useless, and then like Guilt and Bitterness is very much inspired about I love my parents, don't get me wrong, but it's a very complicated situation. I had a very complicated growing up. Like I grew up in a very complicated situation, and I talked about that. I talked about my very complicated relationship with my dad and how that kind of leads into stuff with my mom, which is the second verse and all that. So, and you didn't mention the last song on Sunrise Over the Duke, but Caroline, that's my wife's name. That song is about her.
Yeah.
I had, we were in a long distance relationship for a long time. She lived in Canada. I lived in New Mexico. We were very far apart from one another. And that song is kind of about that. Right. And, so it's just, there's definitely stuff that is very, very, it's just me. It's just my life. And then there's some stuff that's like, it's still just to help the narrative and help carry the story. But yeah, I do like, I have had issues with like drinking in the past. Like, I'll just be honest about that. It's not really an issue now, but like in the past, I've hit the bottle a little too much, when things are bad. You know,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate with that. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I still smoke weed often, like, but you know, I was using it more as like I need to smoke weed because like I need to cope and like I need to
Yeah.
just chill out. Now I
Yeah.
just do it because like I like it. You know, it's good. It's cool. Like it, you know, makes video games better. You know, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But like, you know, so yeah, there's been some times like I've never really done like hard drugs or anything like that. I did mushrooms once.
Yeah.
That's as far
Yeah.
as it is. That's as far as it's been for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, like but yeah, there's definitely like some stuff that I wanted to touch upon with that record, and it's stuff that I want to continue touching upon whenever I do more music, whenever that is. You know, the other thing too is like I'm not gonna put pressure on myself to like do more stuff, but like
Yeah.
I would like to, and I'm working on some stuff and I'm working on some ideas right now. But like if it takes 4 years for that to actually culminate in a project and only 10 people listen to it, so be it. You know,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna do it on my terms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, first, I mean, obviously, I appreciate you being so open about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all
no
those
worries.
things. And I definitely relate a lot to that when it comes to just needing that outlet. That's part of the reason I'm even doing this with the Mariners and whatnot. Right? Is I needed that outlet for me because I was in a really dark place in my life. You know, I have two kids and I'm only 25. So I have two kids. So that, you know, you can do the math a little bit on that. That, you know, I was young and, you know, I work a pretty stressful job in emergency services. And, you know, it's just when your life, especially at a young age, and you become a parent, like work is it, work and family, and that's all you do. And, you know, I just got to that point where it's like I needed something, and you know, I've tried with music a bit here and there, but like I said, it hasn't gotten too far because it's really complicated. It's really the main part.
Yeah.
But you know, I've always used music as part of that escape, and hopefully whenever I do like make music and want to release it, it is coming from that emotional place and that outlet. And I think using those things to, I don't want to say as therapy because I think people should go to regular therapy as well,
Right.
but it's
Agreed. Yeah.
still, yeah, but it's still a thing where it's, you can't really underestimate how freeing it can be for those things until you actually do it and try it. Um,
Like the second verse on 27 Club, I'm like yelling kind of.
mhm.
And like that felt good to record. I
Yeah,
did it a couple times, did a couple takes, and it felt good to just
yeah,
like yell, you know? Like some
yeah,
and it yeah, it's good to kind of just like, you know, because like a lot of people they recommend journaling to like work through things,
uh-huh,
right? That's kind of
yeah,
like my version of that is writing music where I'm talking about stuff that weighs on me pretty heavy. And there's a lot of stuff that's definitely not going to see the light of day that I've written, you know, just that's just for me, you know?
yeah, of course,
And yeah, you know, I think it's just I think music is a great tool for that. And I think nowadays people are a lot more accepting of people talking about that type of stuff because of people like Kid Cudi, you know, doing
yeah,
like to me, he is one of the most influential musicians of the last century, quite frankly, because of that. You know, and he's not the only one that's done that. He's not the only one that paved the way for that, for sure. Like, there's even people that came before him that were doing that to a certain degree, but like that, I just kind of like I always want to champion that. I always want that to be a big part of my music is that um vulnerability and being genuine. I think
hmm
that's a very, very important thing, especially in a when you're doing stuff like hip hop and when you're doing stuff like rap where it gets very braggadocious and it gets about a lot of stuff that just isn't real life that doesn't really connect with most of the audience that's engaging with it. Like it's very, very important for me to be genuine. And dude, that's not to say that I don't like that stuff, by the way, like the braggadocious stuff and all that. I
yeah.
like that stuff. I like
There's a
Travis
place for it.
Scott. I like Lil Baby. I like all those dudes. Like that stuff is good. There's definitely value to that. And I like
Hmm.
party music and I'll probably make some party music sometimes. I'll you know, I'm not
Yeah.
scared of, you know, making some music where I'm just like, yeah, fuck you and fuck this, and, you know, and
Hmm.
all this stuff, you know, like, but like, you know, for the most part though, like the type of music that I enjoy, the type of music that's easiest for me to write is the stuff that's a bit more personal that comes from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, when it comes to music too, it's been interesting considering I'm more of an EDM guy. And I mean, I think that one of the main narratives when people think of EDM is, oh, there's no words, there's no lyrics, blah blah blah, which I mean, granted is true, but like one genre in particular, I've really grown to love, which a lot of it, I feel like I love a lot of like UK EDM. There's something they put in the water there, or the beans on toast there, that just go, they're really good at it. But is drum and bass, which is like
Yeah.
really interesting because there's just something about the flow of it, and it really, when you can get into like a really interesting focus state when you're listening to that. And
Mhm.
that's why I've tried to make that a lot, is just there's something about it when I, especially in a live setting when I've been there, it just, it's the perfect music to like really just I guess lose yourself in, but
Mhm.
not with like, I don't ever like lose myself in like with the drug use and whatnot, which some people
Right.
do, which is, you do you, but
Yeah.
just having that music where there's not, it's a very specific what's going on, and I mean, what's coming, but at the same time, that's my time to, it's almost like meditative when I've listened to it in the past.
Yeah.
So even without lyrics, there's ways to convey those emotions and to get into those emotions. That, yeah, music has been great. I can't really say enough about it. It's always going to be there, I think, in
Yeah.
both of our lives for sure.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
timeless. It's timeless, man. And there's a lot of, songs that have been created over the last how many decades that are just always going to be a part of the culture. Are always
yeah,
going to be a part of people's lives, well beyond when the artists who made them are gone, and well beyond when you and I are gone and all that stuff. There's just certain things that are just always going to be around. And music is just, again, it's this endless platform of expression that
yeah,
I find so beautiful. It's just like art to me in general is just such an amazing thing that we have in this
yeah,
world. And I don't think there will ever come a time where because people are always finding new ways to innovate, especially in music, that it's
yeah,
always going to be fresh. I know that, there's definitely lulls, right? There's going to be a couple of years here and there where it just feels like everything sounds the same and everything's the same, but eventually you break through.
yeah,
Eventually you break through, and someone comes to the platform with a new idea and a new sound and a new voice, and really changes things up. And yeah, I think that there will always be that. It's just kind of the natural process of things. And obviously, um, people are just naturally going to be influenced, right? So, things are going to sound similar-ish, but to me, it's about who best builds upon those ideas and those influences and takes them another step forward. And I think
yeah,
even nowadays, we have a lot of artists that are really doing that and are really pushing the boundaries of music. And maybe one day I can maybe contribute to that a little bit. That would be
yeah,
cool. Because like I love doing the podcast. I can't imagine not ever doing the podcast. Like even if I were to do music more seriously, because it's not a huge like um how should I put this? It's not it doesn't take me away from the rest of my life too much. Like the Twitter aspect of it does, but I can
hmm,
control that. But like doing
yeah,
the show itself, just like the actual act of recording the show, editing it, getting it posted, takes like an hour and a half. It's not a huge
yeah,
deal. So I could always do that even if I pursued music more seriously. But yeah, I would love to make that actually my job eventually, or
yeah.
like doing some sort of entertainment that's not just putting my idiotic thoughts into a microphone about baseball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I will say that when I was listening to Sunrise Over Duke, I definitely saw that Kid Cudi inspiration. I was seeing a bit of it was reminding me a lot of Tyler, Igor, specifically that
Yeah,
era of him.
love
So
Tyler. Yeah,
I think I think you did a good job capturing those
thank
emotions,
you so much.
either in the beats that you chose to use for that, but you're using your voice a lot, like you said earlier, in the background with like the ad libs and whatnot. I thought it definitely reminded me of those things. So
Yeah,
uh, which I know is what you were looking for. So, now you can hear it from someone being like, hey, like
Thank
I
you so
literally
much.
was, I was literally
Thank you
thinking
for
of
the
Igor.
validation. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, to kind of close it out, like last two questions I have, and these, first of all, I'm going to do the cheesiest music question ever.
Sure.
Mount Rushmore of music for you and your taste. Obviously, I know one spot and where that's going. So
artists or albums from Mount I can do both.
I guess you can do both. Why not?
Dude, we could
They
be
both
here for
matter.
we could be here for another 2 hours, and I'm totally fine with that. Yeah. So, all right. So artists, obviously, Cuddy. Like one.
Yeah.
Dude, Cuddy is just.
I'm shocked. No way.
Yeah. Kendrick. Love Kendrick. I know that's such a basic answer, but Kendrick, I mean, undeniably,
he's too good.
Amazing. Just an
Absolutely.
amazing artist. Man, this is tough. See, here's the problem that I run into is that there's so many people that I love that influence me that I'm just like, do I really want to leave that person off?
Yeah. The Mount Rushmore question is cliche, but it's good for that reason. You have to pick.
I don't want to make it all rappers too. Shoot. But I got to throw Biggie on there too, because Biggie is just like, dude, I love Biggie. Biggie opened up my mind to a lot of stuff. I love Biggie. Man. This is such a good question. This is such a good question.
I'm like trying to think of mine too, and I'm having
too. If you have any as well, throw them out there.
Like my personal number one has right now is a group called Ivy Lab. They're a duo, EDM duo from the UK. And the reason I like them the most is that I think they are the most versatile when it comes to electronic music and whatnot. They have done, I mean, on Spotify, I think I have like 50 something songs that they're saved. So they're easily my number one. But anytime I have a friend who like wants to like go into EDM or like just try it out and wants that feeler, that's who I send. I'm like, you are going to find a genre that you like from these guys. They make everything well. One of my favorite concerts I've ever been to was last December, and they did an audio visual set called Infinite Falling Ground, where they had a whole visual set along with the album of the same name. And it was just one of the most unique experiences I've ever had. I made sure to get front rail for it. I was like, and it's not like, you're bumping around, jumping type thing. I was just paying attention to like what they were trying to convey with all the songs they made. There was a whole narrative around it. There was a whole movie around it. Basically, there was a couple spots of like interpretive dance too that was really good. And so it's just when someone can, or a group can span across so many different styles and genres and still keep my attention, like, I have to give it to them. So
no, that's a great answer. There's so many like different artists kind of running through my mind. Like, I used to love Muse. Really fell off recently, like really bad. Like the last few albums have been terrible, like really bad. I used to love Muse. That was one of the first concerts I ever went to, was a Muse concert. Like, they were insane. That was right after that the Resistance came out in 2009, which was kind of the beginning of the end for them. But I probably wouldn't put them on there. You know what? I'm gonna throw out Vampire Weekend, because they've been so consistent, and they've kind of changed their sound, not too much, but they've been able to adapt and kind of modernize their sound with each album. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the consistency of that. And I also appreciate the fact that they don't, like, it's an event whenever a Vampire Weekend album comes out. They're not dropping every year. It's not like, new year, I expect a new album type of thing. It's like, you might get one like 5 years apart from one another.
Yeah.
Now, I think that sometimes can be taken a little too far, like with regards to like Frank Ocean, who was just like, I'm going to drop an album and disappear for 8 years. And
I'm gonna do this performance at Coachella, and then I'm just gonna change everything last minute.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna like dance around on stage and peace out. And it's like, okay,
yeah. Oh, but that's a galaxy brain to the Frank Ocean stands. Like, oh my gosh, he's such a genius for doing that.
Right.
It's like,
I know.
what are you talking about?
No, there's definitely some things where it's like, yeah, it's different, but it's not a good kind of different.
Yeah, that's where I was.
It's not as deep as you think it is. It's just like,
yeah,
that to me is just he's kind of being an asshole. Like,
yeah, I didn't like that either. I mean, I can't talk too much because I don't listen to him. But at the same time, when I saw people like justifying that, I'm like, I mean, granted, I don't have the hugest empathy for people who go to Coachella in the first place, but at the same time, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you spent the money to be there, and you thought you were getting this performance, and you got really was barely a performance.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. So
I would that also kind of makes me think about Andre 3000, who like we've been waiting for a solo Andre 3000 album for so long, and then he's like putting out a solo album, but it's a flute album. You're a dick. You're a dick. No, like come on, like. Yeah, I appreciate him like wanting to express himself in a very different way and all that stuff, but it's like you know what people want, you know it, and it's just like that. Like you are very aware of the decision that you just made. You're kind of an asshole.
Yeah, but you almost kind of wish there's more transparency from them, just being like, "Listen, I'm not going to do that right now." So at least you're not like on the edge of your seat, being like, "Is he? Is he not?" Like, just tell us if you are. You know.
All right. So Mount Rushmore of albums. Man on the Moon 2, obviously. Like again, for as long as I am on this earth,
of course,
best album of all time in my mind.
Yeah.
Depression Cherry by Beach House, great record, amazing record. Origin of Symmetry by Muse, amazing record. See, here's the thing again, where it's like I'm at number 4 and there's just like 50 million possibilities running through my head. I'm like, oh god, you got to pick one.
I'm like looking through my Spotify because I'm having a hard time with just my artist Mount Rushmore. I'm just like, who do I listen to? You know, I'm just like having such a hard time with that.
Actually, I know it. The Money Store by Death Grips. It has to be on there. It has to be on there. Money Store is just an insane album.
Yeah. No, I know Death Grips is. I mean, I watch a lot of Anthony Fantano, so I know a bit about the meme around Death Grips.
Hey, everybody!
So
Anthony Fantano here.
Well, So, but that's a good thinking exercise, right? Like, especially when thinking about music, is like, who is kind of at that top for you, and who's been the most inspirational? Like, that's kind of the easiest way to think about it. So. Yeah, I'm glad it was hard because it should be hard.
Yeah, for me, it's like, all right, like if we want to look at it, like my Mount Rushmore of artists, like in terms of like influences, like Cuddy for me is like the vulnerability, the ability to use his voice more as an instrument type of stuff, the blend of like indie rock and hip hop type of stuff. Vampire Weekend's like the quirkiness, the very lightheartedness, very upbeat type of like, which you see at times in my music too, where it's kind of blended, where it's like one track is going to be like super depressing, and then the next track is going to be like, hey, sunflowers. Biggie is like from a rapping, like a technical standpoint in terms of like rapping flow wise, like very inspired by his flow and like how he like rides a beat, the way that he turns syllables and phrases and all that stuff. And then Kendrick is the storytelling. The storytelling, the voice inflections, the ability to change voices. That's the other thing that I really like pride myself on doing, is like changing voices to make it sound like okay, maybe I have a different answer for my Mount Rushmore is Gorillaz.
Ooh, yeah, I grew up on Gorillaz. Hell yeah.
And so my whole like, I don't want to like do like a Damon Albarn thing where it's like a cartoon band or whatever, but I want people to be like, is that the same person rapping who's singing? And is that the same person that was rapping the first verse that's doing the second verse now? Like, what? Like 27 Club, right? 27 Club first verse is very different from the second verse. Like, that's intentional. That's intentional. I want it to sound like it's kind of a band, or like there's a lot of different voices going on in my head, that like, that are kind of like breaking free. They're breaking loose. Like, So and that's very influenced by Gorillaz.
Yeah,
So
you
we're
just
we're just
reminded
gonna
me of Gorillas.
yeah,
So
we're gonna carve out a fifth on the Mount Rushmore here, and that's gonna be Damon Albarn and the Gorillaz.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that because I grew up. I think Demon Days was the first ever album as a
Yeah.
kid when I like
Oh,
legitimately
dude.
had
Yeah,
love
that's a
for
good
an
call.
album.
Same for me. Same for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like again, I was a late bloomer, but when I was like 9 years old, we went to Disneyland, and I
Mhm.
remember we went to like they had this like ESPN Zone thing back then. I don't think they have it anymore, but they had this like
No.
ESPN thing, and when we walked in, they were playing Dare, and I was like, "What the fuck is this song? This is
Yeah.
insane. This is crazy. Oh my god!" And so like I looked it up, all this stuff, and dude, I bought that album. One of the first albums I ever bought. Amazing
Yeah.
record, just an insane record. Yeah.
Yeah, the first thing I think of is Clint Eastwood. That drum, the very start. The
Yeah. Bum, bum, bum. Did you see?
uh,
Did you see his Damon Albarn's like Radio 1 interview or whatever it was?
yeah,
Where
it was like some
a
music
preset.
making machine
It's a
preset.
preset
Yeah,
yeah, on like
no,
on a keyboard. Yeah,
I know. Well,
so funny.
it's stuff like that where it's like when I'm trying to make music on my own, I'm like, oh, it's so complicated, and I just cannot figure this out. And then I see stuff like that, I'm just like, it's really that easy. Sometimes,
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
just stumble upon it. Honestly, it's just yeah, it brings me down to earth. I have the same thing when I go in person because like when I'll examine the song, I'll be like, oh, it's really only these four parts. I can't really do that on my own. Like I'm overthinking it, which
yeah,
I think every music artist does. But yeah,
yeah.
I I have that love for Gorillas. I will always will. I wanted to see them a couple years ago when they were doing that last tour, but it was just like the tickets were like $200 a pop, like
Yeah,
minimum. It's like
yeah.
I can't do that, but yeah, I've always
Yeah.
wanted to see them. So,
Demon, we might have to do a fifth on the Mount Rushmore for albums too, and throw Demon Days up there. But
Demon Days, it is so
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the
Plastic
last
Beach too is great. Yeah,
Yeah. So the last
yeah.
question I have, I'm going to tie the two worlds together in music and baseball that we've talked about. And this is a
Okay.
two-part question. I'm
All
actually
right.
really happy that I came up with this. So, first, if you were a professional baseball player, first question is, would you prefer to be a hitter so your walk-up song plays multiple times a day?
Right.
Or would you prefer to be the closer who only plays once, but you get all the production with it, you usually get the lights flickering, all that stuff?
Right. Yeah.
And then, of course, what would the song be?
See, we've gotten asked some variation of this question a few times on the show, but like my answer typically changes. But also, no one's ever asked from that standpoint of like, would you rather? Because there are two very different
Very
things.
different. Yeah.
Very, very different things in terms of pitcher walkout side. And also it's like very different if you're a starter or a reliever.
Yeah, I'm talking closer, like with
Closer like
Seawald, he
Edwin
had
Diaz and all that stuff.
thinking
Yeah.
Seawald, like had the God, that what's the song? It's from House of Pain, jump around.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
had that, right? So yeah, something like that.
Okay, I'm gonna give you answers for both, but I'm also gonna tell you my preference. So my preference would be to be a hitter because I think my pick for the hitter would apply better than my pick for being a reliever.
Okay.
Or it's just a better answer for me in my mind, at least, just my taste. It's gonna be Cuddy. It's gonna be something from Element 2, obviously. No shit,
Yeah.
right? It's Rev by Kid Cudi. I don't know if you've ever heard that song, but just kind of the beginning of it, with the guitar riff, the dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that dude.
Nice.
Like,
Yeah.
you hear that as an opposing pitcher, you know what time it is. You're about to get fucked up. Like, I'm about to take a yard. Like,
Okay, nice.
But yeah, for pitcher, one song that I really like, Kevin Gossman has this here in Toronto. It's "Money" by Pink Floyd, and whenever he strikes someone out, they do the cash register sound from that song. I think that's really sick. I think that's really dope. Honestly, that might have been my answer had Kevin Gossman not stolen my idea. Obviously, he stole my idea. I really like the guitar breakdown of Supremacy by Muse, which is like, again, we're talking about like post the fall off of Muse, but they do have this song called Supremacy. I think it was supposed to be like a James Bond song. Like they made it to be like in a James Bond movie, and it never was.
Okay.
But there's like this breakdown where it goes dun 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 dun, dun. That shit is like haunting.
Nice.
Like I would like, you hear that for
Yeah.
Closer coming out. I don't know, like
pretty nice.
Yeah, and then like it goes and I feel like people could like chant to that and stuff. Like, yeah, that would be pretty cool. Yeah.
Who do you think had the best closer walkout in history? Because like I think, I mean, you could say Mariano with Enter Sandman, but
yeah, it's hard
one
to
that comes
that.
to my mind is Grant Balfour with the Oakland A's when he was using One by Metallica.
Ooh,
and you had all those people in the outfield like doing like headbanging over the rail and stuff like that with the long hair. That
dude
was nice.
That's a good one. That's a good call. Shoot. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to top Enter Sandman. I mean, that goes crazy. I mean, even Edwin Diaz's one recently is like pretty iconic with the trumpet, Tommy Trumpet. Like,
yeah.
See, when I was growing up, really good. Actually, I might have to steal your answer. That's a really good one. I kind of forgot about that. That's crazy.
Well, I grew up wanting to be a closer. Like whenever I was playing, I never got the chance to pitch much because I was such a big kid that like I just got playing at first base. But I always wanted to pitch. I always wanted to be like a reliever closer. So I very much paid attention to those things. But yeah, it'll never happen. But I like to think in my mind like me running in from the outfield and have that song coming on, or I have a couple that are like EDM songs. I'm like, would work well for those. But I'm just like, I can't imagine the rush.
If I ever go to Washington, which I'm hoping to do one day, sooner rather than later. Though I do need to renew my passport. My passport has expired. I need to renew.
It's going to take you months. You better get started now.
But yeah. So the one thing that I want to do when we come is do like a softball game with some listeners, or like wiffle ball or something like that. So you can be the closer. We'll play the song. You can be the closer. You can run out.
Deal. You got it.
Yeah. No, but I want to do it like that, where there's like walk up music. Everyone gets to pick their walk up song and all that stuff, and have some fun with it. I think that'd be cool. I know Lookout Landing's done like some charity stuff and all that. Like that would pretty much be in the same vein. Maybe we could like add a charity aspect to it too, and maybe there could be like a buy-in for like that goes to someone, some charity, but
and I mean, position it to where you do that earlier in the day, and then you end the night on a 7:05 game or something in Seattle, and I mean that's just a full day of sounds awesome. So
so would love to do that at some point. Some other ideas we have is like if I ever come out, is like to do like a show at like a bar or something, like a live show. Have some people come out, which like that I got to get out of my own head a little bit about that, because like here's the thing, like Colby's used to getting recognized now and stuff. Like dude got recognized at Costco in his hometown. Like,
really? Dang.
Yeah, so like he's like used to that stuff. I'm not though. Like my only exposure to that has been the playoff games, where like I had like 3 people come up to me, and one of them like, and this is like at kind of near the start of Locked On for us too. So that like, so
now it's gonna be
so like we like I had one guy that was like, hey, are you that guy from Locked In Mariners? I'm like, yeah, I'm that guy. Yeah. He's like, cool, man, I like your show. And I'm like, all right, cool. And that was it. Like but yeah, so like that's gonna take some time to get used to, is like people like, because like Colby's signed, someone had Colby sign a Dylan Moore card, which is fucking hilarious. So funny. But like like people are like, hey, if I mail you something, would you sign it for me and mail it back to me? I'm like, I live in another country, so probably not. But but yeah, so like that would take some time getting used to, and like doing a show in front of people would take some getting used to and some talking into, and maybe a little liquid courage. But but
well, I was thinking about that when I was like, because my goal at this point is I want to go to 4 games this year, because last year I only went to 2, so I'm like, I'm gonna try to double it, whatever. Like I'm like, well, now if I'm doing content, I'm like, I should like vlog going to the games, and it would even be fun to do. The way I envision it is do a podcast, center field, you have the fence that overlooks the whole field, and you just have little mics that just plug into your phone, and it's like you just do a podcast literally during the game. Like,
dude,
that's
that sounds
cool,
amazing.
but
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you should do that, because I don't think anyone's really doing that right now. Like, no one. I don't think maybe I'm wrong. I try to be as in tune with the community as possible, but
Mhm.
I don't think I've seen anyone who like actually vlogs going to the games and stuff. Which, personally speaking, if I lived in the area, I would actually do that. I would do that.
Yeah.
I've even thought about doing that, like going to see the Mariners play in Toronto, but it's also like, am I really just going to do this one video or 2 videos or whatever it's going to be for the series and then just not do it? Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So, but like, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think doing a podcast out in center field, like, great idea. Like, just
yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting when. Yeah. I thought it was interesting that you brought up and I'm not trying to like go like super over time or whatever, but I thought it was interesting that you talked about if you got recognized and your fear of being recognized, because the first thing I thought of is how much of a B word I am whenever I see someone that I look up to in person. I am literally terrified to ever go up to someone and like say hi. Even if I'm like, this is absolutely the time that I could do that, I just won't, because I get so nervous, right? Like, so it's like, I feel like even though I've talked to you now for basically 2 hours, right? I'm like, if I ever saw you at a Mariner game, I would be like literally debating whether I should go say hi, because I'm just like, I think I always worry that like I'm going to interrupt something, and so that it's very it's like the other side of the coin. Interesting.
I'll say this, like, if anyone's listening, like, if you do see me out, like, if you're in Toronto or whatever, like, for whatever reason, who knows, but if you're in Toronto, like, for the Mariners games or whatever, you see me, like, you can totally approach me, it's fine. Like, I just, like, for me, it's weird, like, and again, like, from my perspective, I'm just a guy that talks about baseball on the internet. Like, I don't have the perspective of that being a very big deal for really anyone. I'm glad that it is, though. I'm like totally like respectful of that, but like, I just haven't fully wrapped my head around that. I think Colby has a bit better because like he actually sees it, but for me, it's just like it's all in theory, and I just hear a bunch of like we get emails sometimes. Again, like, can you sign this for me and all this stuff if I mail it to you? And I'm like, it's just weird for me, right? I think it's something that I would definitely get used to, but being so far removed from it, being in Toronto and all that, where like people here don't know me, like, that's like, there's like no risk of that ever happening while I'm just like out and about, like where it is for Colby, where he might get recognized at Costco in Yakima, right? Like, like I don't have that, so I don't have that perspective. So it's a little so that's just, again, it's just that would just take some time getting used to, but overall, like, approach me. Like, I'm not gonna be weird, I'm not gonna be like, fuck off, or whatever. Like,
to be fair, I would be less scared going up to you than I would be to Colby, because Colby intimidates me a lot, but I'm sure he's a nice guy. I'm not worried
Colby's
about that front.
All right, so here's the thing, right? Like, Colby acts like that on the podcast. Colby's actually sweet, and I know it's like, well, you're his friend, you're gonna say that. Well, Colby annoys the shit out of me, like, more than any of you. So I'm just gonna, like, first and foremost, I'll get into the recording room with this guy, and I'll be like strapped for time. Like, Thursday, I needed to go somewhere on Thursday before we pre-recorded Fanfiction Friday, and I'm like, dude, I have to catch a train in like an hour, and he's just like on his phone, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, just in my lineup for fantasy football. I'm like, dude, you can do that after the show. Like, just do that. He's like, nope, nope, don't tell me what to do. Nope. So like, he does that shit to me too, right? Like, and so like, he annoys the ever living hell out of me, but he is a sweetheart at the end of the day. He doesn't want to let on, and he doesn't want people to know that, but he is a sweetheart. He's a giant teddy bear. Like, at the end of the day, like, that's just, Colby is that guy. Colby does have some asinine takes that he puts out on Twitter. Like, 100%.
I was gonna ask if you guys have ever had that conversation about his game time tweeting, because that has to be where. I mean, me, and I'm fans of you guys, and I generally agree, and I feel like can't understand where you guys come from. There has been some times where I'm like, okay,
Colby,
chill out a little bit.
Colby has said some wild shit where I'm like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
No, we that's the other thing too. No one trashes Colby harder than I do privately.
Sure.
Like I give Colby the business behind the scenes, but like it's gotten to a point though where like anything he says now, because people like think of him as that and they read everything in that tone. Some things that he says that like people read it in the wrong tone, and it's like, no, he's not actually like, he's not being that aggressive about that, or he's not like, but I don't blame people at this point. It's not like I'm like saying like that's your fault for like misinterpreting him. I'm just saying like it does. He's now built that reputation where anything that he says is just going to be taken in that light, where it really like most of the time he's actually being pretty neutral about stuff, but only really I know that because like I know him, right? But most people that only see him on Twitter are gonna take that a very different way. So I totally understand that. But yeah, Colby is a sweetheart at the end of the day. He wouldn't like that I said that, but I don't care.
We're gonna clip this, you know. Just get it out there.
but yeah, even he annoy, like, just so you guys know, he even annoys the hell out of me too. But you know, one thing you can't take away from him, guy knows ball. Does he just he does he knows ball. So I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, but about the team. But hey, you know, but for the most part, he knows ball, and don't clip this part. Sometimes he's been right when I've been wrong about certain things. And he's changed my mind.
There it is. There it is.
Don't let him hear that.
Well, we're just over the 2 hour mark, so I think it's a good time to start wrapping it up. Obviously, I've said it over DMs a bunch of times to you, but I can't say how appreciative I am that you are willing to give me 2 hours of your time to come on the show.
That's all good. Dude, it's Saturday. I got nothing better to do than to play like Fortnite. That's what my plan is today. That's why I went and did Christmas shopping yesterday. Partly was so I could just play Fortnite.
Well, I think it obviously means a lot more than, it's probably hard to grasp like how much something like this means to someone like me. But, I just want to make sure how I make it clear how appreciative I am of that.
Thank you.
So it's been awesome to have you on, and not only just talk about Jerry Dipoto and the ownership the whole time, even though a lot of my questions were geared towards that. But I generally wanted your take, for those things. So but if you're listening, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'd love to see it. I'm going to be trying to get these on Apple Music and Spotify as well. I'm just working through that, and I'm learning. So it might take me a few days for that to happen, but going to try that as well. Can't say how regular these podcasts are going to be. It's going to be when I can, but if you subscribe, you'll be the first to know when it comes out next. Follow me on Twitter at Mariners Jersey. Obviously, follow Ty. All of his descriptions are going to be, or all of his links are going to be in the description for you as well. And
all of my descriptions.
All of your descriptions are going to be in the description. So, but I appreciate you watching, and thank you.